Okay, let's begin. So if everyone is happily seated, this is going to be the moment which could go on for the next 45 minutes or the next 3 hours and 45 minutes or maybe the next year, because we've entitled this session, interestingly, The Future of 3D Storytelling, in terms of a panel, and a really excellent, talented panel, many of whom you've met. If you need introductions, they're happy to introduce themselves, and Phil is going to chair this event, but I want you to welcome this panel, and my only job is to try and stop them talking. But you need to know something. They don't just want to talk, they want to hear you talk, so there's going to be lots of Q&A, I believe.
That's all true, that's all true. Thank you very much, thank you very much. Well, I think, suffice it to say, we've got pretty much a very healthy dollop of the finest cream of talent, of 3D talent in the UK here. We've got Julian Napier, who's a leading director. He did Carmen, The London Eye, Starlight Express. Adam Sculthorpe is a stereographer, vastly experienced in multi-camera work and shooting as live and general stereography. Matt Bristow is from Prime Focus, who Prime Focus is the world's, arguably the world's leading 2D to 3D conversion entity. Mark Samuelson is a 2D film producer of absolute note and is now branching into the 3D world. And Caroline Hawkins is an executive producer and producer of a global storming television series, and is, along with Atlantic Films, who did the dinosaur film, is leading the charge of 3D documentary film production. So what I thought we'd do on this session is just let each of these guys do like a 1, 2, 3 minute state of their own personal nation. This is my angle. This is what I think it's all about now, and this is what I think 3D storytelling should be looking at and driving forwards into the future. Hopefully that will be quite different. Hopefully we've chosen a panel who don't all agree with everything. Then I think we're just going to I'm then going to just turn it right over. If there's any questions, if any things that come up which I fundamentally disagree with, I might lob in a little question to get us started. But then what I want to do is get straight into Q&A. What I'm hoping is that over the last day and 3/4, there have been things boiling and burning inside you that you've wanted to either comment on or ask a question of. So we are going to do it in sort of 2 types of sections. I do want questions, genuine questions on the other hand. Then I will then turn and ask anyone else if they've got a burning 35-second, 45-second point that they want to make. What I don't want is that the first question, sometimes questions end up being statements. We're going to have a bunch of questions and then we can have some statements. So let's just fire off in no particular order. Jules, are you happy going first?
Sure.
Julian Napier.
Where to start with this? I'm a 3D director, have been doing so for the last 8 years. Lucky enough to be sort of cutting my teeth and developing my craft when the spotlight wasn't really on 3D, so I could quite happily make a few mistakes, get away with it. I think that's sort of less of a luxury to people that are breaking into it now. What's interesting about this conference is it kind of gives you a nice glimpse into, I think, what the state of the nation is right now in terms of 3D, and I'm quite sort of very happy and encouraged to see that it's looking pretty healthy. But there's still a long way to go, I think, in terms of the way that the industry needs to embrace this as a valid and new aesthetic and tool set. And I don't think, personally, that's going to really evolve and develop until more people, particularly directors, start to involve themselves in the not so much the technology, but certainly in the craft of 3D itself, in terms of what it offers storytelling, in the same ways that camera craft, lighting offers storytelling. Most directors will have a thorough knowledge of focal lengths. They'll know what kind of depth of field that they'd want for a particular shot. Because they'll use that to generate the intimacy or the emotional resonance that they want from a particular shot. And until they involve themselves directly in learning what 3D itself can give them as a tool set, they're missing a whole bunch of tricks. Because if you're just purely reliant on getting in the experts to come and wave their 3D voodoo, you'll get 3D. These guys are, like Adam, absolutely brilliant and competent. They'll come and they'll give you 3D. But what you won't be able to do necessarily is prescribe exactly the 3D that you want as a visionary, the way you want it told. So, I think for one part, for it to really advance and
Can I
develop.
just pick up on that, Jules? Because I was involved in the first one that we did. An example of that, I suppose, is that the first thing we did, which was Starlight, which was your first 3D project as a director, we had a white-coated stereographer who came on and said, it had to be like this. And at that point, Jules knew bugger all about 3D, and that's what you had to accept.
And absolutely, I had to obviously defer to the experts. I knew nothing. I literally blagged this job. I had to, land on my feet running. I'd taken some 3D stills, and somehow I managed to wing getting a 3D film job.
You should see those stills, ladies and gentlemen. I don't believe the book ever got published, but it was the joy of something, wasn't it?
It was indeed. And what's very interesting is at that time, and I'm still hearing this today, in fact, I was prescribed this sort of 5-second rule about the minimum length of time that you need a shot to last in 3D. And I think a lot of myths, I think, that get perpetuated, these things, on the one hand, are valid in a particular context, on the other hand, are not. It's really dependent on what you're shooting, why and how. I stuck to that 4 or 5 second ruling because I had no other option. It was my first gig. I was very lucky about 2 years later when the Starlight was picked up by Clear Channel Entertainment, who wanted to throw a bit more money into those movies. I got a second bite of the cherry to re-edit those movies. And I cut them a lot faster, and it worked, and it was a lot less pedestrian than it was in its first incarnation, which I was disappointed about. But, I had to. But
pretty much
wind it up.
2 or 3 minutes don't last very long, because there's going to be questions. If I can summarise, I think where Julian's interesting point to me there is, and it's a thing that's going on a number of the movie message lists at the moment, is how long stereographers. So Jules' point is all directors should get their heads round stereography in the way that they've got their heads round light and film stock and lens choice.
Cameras.
So if we move on to Adam, who is not a man in a white coat, he's a man in a sort of aubergine fleece, but nevertheless,
it's chilly in here.
he is a stereographer. So if you would like to sort of give your 3 minutes worth.
Well, sort of pick up there and say that a lot of things that Julian is saying are completely valid, but to start about I'm considering myself certainly the new breed of stereographers. I've been involved in 3D for 2.5 years. It doesn't sound a great amount of time when you look at some of the people that have been sat up here that have been shooting 3D for 10, 15, 20 years. But what I have been able to achieve in such a small amount of time is an opportunity to shoot a lot of 3D in a small amount of time. When we first started off experimenting with 3D, when I was basically ran the 3D project at a company called Telegenic, who are very closely aligned with Sky and the whole Sky 3D channel. We spent the best part of 5 months trialing, testing, training, and in that short period of time, a few of us shot over 400 hours of 3D. We made some horrendous mistakes. Thankfully, they're locked away in a cupboard somewhere and hopefully will never make the light of day. But it enabled us to learn, and it enabled us to learn very quickly from one job to the next job, experiment, try different things, and basically learn a craft with the support of Reality and a number of other very well-known stereographers. And I've had some great opportunities to work with the likes of Sean Phillips, who's probably one of the best stereographers out there, and to learn from them on a number of different projects. Carmen's one, Montrose Jazz Festival is another. Absorb all the time. But I think what this has meant, and the fact that my background is as a cameraman and working with a director, is not to be Mr. Whitecoat, not to be the person who goes, that's impossible. I've learnt through my entire career that actually, as working as part of a team, you can achieve a lot. And it's listening and bouncing ideas off people, trying to develop that look, that feeling that the whole production team want to achieve. And that's ultimately possible because getting in there right at the beginning and that initial planning stage is one of the best things for anyone with a 3D project, is to, whoever their stereographer is going to be, whoever their DP is going to be, director, work together. It's not something that should be, oh, there's Mr. The sorcerer of 3D over there with his black cape, not sharing any information. I've done that.
I can ask you a quick question. I mean, there's a thing called the CML message list, which are really quite interesting. And there's a whole chatter on the CML message list at the moment that there's a current feature film, can't remember which one it is, Musketeers, or one of the big feature films, where the DOP has decided to remove the stereographer and is now reckons that he's learnt enough about 3D that he's taking on that stereographic role himself. So Adam, do you see yourself still in business in 5 years' time as a stereographer, or will your stereographic tool set be spread around the heads of department within a film crew?
Well, I think that that's a very valid point, and there's a lot of discussion on that at the moment. And in fact, interestingly, I went out to Camerimage, the big cinematography festival, and had an opportunity to speak to a lot of incredibly well-known DPs. And that was the exact question that a lot of people who are very high up in the BSc said, why can't I learn these skills? Why can't I just have a camera crew that know all these different pieces of information? Well, yes, you can, but what I'm trying to do is to follow the production from the initial planning stage through the shooting right through to the edit. So I'm following the 3D and keeping that 3D quality coherently throughout the entire piece.
I think that's a maybe, ladies and gentlemen. What do you think? No, I think that's a very valid point, because actually there's a number of films that I've been obliquely involved in, as in, I don't know, they're being post-produced in the same place that I was post-producing, where there were decisions that were being made in the post. The stereographer was on a completely different job. So in terms of what was the plan for the 3D when it was shot, was now being five-person Chinese whispered, actually depth graded and set for the final version of what the film was going to look like in a grading suite, and the stereographer was miles away. What Adam is saying was actually the whole 3D game is important enough that whether you call him or her a stereographer, that maybe a film in the future needs to have one person or two persons following a film all the way through from beginning to end, so that there's a cohesion and a homogeneity about the 3D of that project.
Can I just add to that as well? Very
quickly.
Because I'm very prescriptive about my 3D, as Adam and Phil would testify. I know a lot about the stereography myself. I could potentially not use the assistance of a stereographer. However, my duty ultimately is to the story and the filmmaking, and it's a department like anything else. I don't want to be there bothering and fussing with the stereography. I want to be there directing the action, and blocking that in the camera work and so on. So it's still a very valid and necessary
can I come in there and basically say one very quick thing that I think
final
would
point,
link
because we're going to
on.
whiz through the rest, but this is exactly what I want to get going with everyone later on. Final point.
The science of doing the 3D, the technology, is something as a director, as a creative, shouldn't be worrying about.